Chapter 181, Tony's Magic Fungi. While Mordo faced a crisis of his own, Tony wasn't having an easy time either. The creatures attacking the New York Sanctum were all from hell. Three-headed dogs, two-headed dragons, Hydra, Leviathan, massive beasts with thick hides, sky-high magic resistance, and impossibly long health bars. When the wizard team arrived, they unleashed volleys of Avada Kedavra. The hell creatures were scorched black by the curse, but they shook it off, only growing angrier. The unforgivable curses, instead of killing them, seemed to awaken their killing instinct. The sorcerers had to change tactics fast. Some raised seraphim shields at the front, others behind them rained down spells, bolts of Balthak, severing charms, fiendfire. Everyone used their strongest magic, but the creatures' resistance was overwhelming. Ordinary wizardry from Hogwarts barely fazed them. Only white magic, spells that tapped the power of the Vishanti, could harm these things reliably. Bolts of Balthak, when they connected, could kill, but the spell was difficult and costly. Only a handful of sorcerers could perform it. After several rounds of bombardment, the front line began to break. The horde seemed endless. Another creature stepped through the rift every few seconds. They charged the shields without hesitation, and soon whole lines of seraphim shields were spiderwebbed with cracks. "It's our turn!" Tony shouted. He canceled the deformation curse on his suit, letting it revert into a towering armor tens of meters tall. He lifted off, diving into the monster horde and sweeping them with enhanced repulsors, cleaving off heads and tearing through ranks. Natasha planted the magical spear, leapt over the shields, and yelled, "Girls, show them what you've got." The women in black poured out of the line. Their physical prowess rivaled the beasts. Yelena uppercut one head of a three-headed dog from below, then, dodging the other two mouths, sliced off another. For a moment, fewer than 100 of them held the demon charge at bay, giving the sorcerers in the back a bit of breathing room. But the mages didn't stay idle. Setarok's crimson chains were used to restrain monsters. Others charged in with the Vishanti's holy sword and the rings of Ragador. Kamar Taj sorcerers fought like warriors, willing to get bloody and willing to sacrifice. Who designs a Hell Lord to use so many multi-headed monsters? Tony grumbled as he wrestled a two-headed dragon, blasting into one mouth with laser cannons. Could be he's a chatterbox and needs more mouths for his minions to keep up with him. Banner's voice crackled in Tony's earpiece. "Are you calling me a chatterbox, Banner? Come on, I'm clearly a serious guy." Tony shot back, then winced as the dragon's other head chomped his armored arm. The fungal armor at the limb tore under the bite. A command from the chip at the base of Tony's skull pulsed through the suit. The damaged arm shattered into a writhing mass of black fungal filaments and poured over the dragon. The fungus's usual role, absorbing and storing nutrients, suddenly became an offensive weapon. Within seconds, the red dragon shrieked as the fungus swallowed it, leaving only withered bones. Its dimensional energy was pulled into the fungal mass. The fungus god armor visibly grew. "This works? Isn't that a little brutal?" Tony muttered, brushing off the skeleton. "Brutal, yes. Effective, definitely," Banner said. "What are you thinking?" "I think I've found a way to deal with these hell creatures," Tony said, eyes alight. He'd always treated the fungus's self-feeding property with caution. It was a double-edged sword. Normally, he avoided letting it devour too much. He hadn't expected the battlefield to turn that ability into an advantage. "Everyone, fall back," Tony shouted. "Pull back and put up your shields. Now!" The women in black exchanged looks and retreated. Their boss's brother could be reckless, but when he gave an order like that, they trusted him to have a plan. The sorcerers followed, reluctant but forced by the pressure, and reformed the line of seraphim shields. Tony, holding a large hell creature in one massive hand, laughed. "Everyone, stand back. You haven't seen anything yet." Mark 10's hands burst into black fungal tendrils and wrapped the two creatures he held, breaking them down into nutrients in seconds. Tony's fungus hadn't been intended to be so voracious, but now it was being powered by the 10 rings. The rings' mysterious energy neutralized the monster's dimensional defenses, letting the fungal threads penetrate to the cellular cores. After absorbing the creature's energy, the suit grew another notch in size. "Jarvis, route full power to the 10 rings. Feed the fungal growth. Go all out," Tony ordered. "Yes, sir." Jarvis had uploaded himself into the chip at the base of Tony's skull to assist in combat. Together, they pushed energy into the rings. At once, the Mark X form destabilized. The black and gold armor seemed to dissolve into a seething tide of fungal filaments that spread across the floor of the mirror dimension like an oil slick. Fungal matter could burn like oil, but when Tony ignited these threads, they didn't consume oxygen. They fed on the life force of the hell beasts. The demons ignored the dark carpet beneath their feet, certain it wouldn't hurt them. Then the filaments crawled up limbs and bodies, wrapped around them, and began to burn in a way that ate away at their existence. The creatures' roars dwindled to weak whimpers, then to silence. In seconds, the horde that had poured through the portal had been reduced to withered bones. The fungal mass absorbed the remnants, and the suit swelled larger still. Chapter 182. Jang is human or a ghost? Everyone's showing off. Only Mordo is getting beaten. The mirror dimension was so quiet a pin could be heard falling. All the sorcerers stood frozen. Even the men in black, who had already seen the fungus god armor, were visibly stunned, their emotions barely contained. Tony extended the armor's arms, expecting cheers and applause. He waited, then waited some more, and heard nothing. He turned and found the sorcerers staring at him one by one, like little boys in a cathedral watching a priest. The men in black were more restrained, their looks a mix of admiration and faint disgust. All right, you're as unappreciative as Leon, Tony said with a dry smile. Secretly, he decided that his next armor would be outrageously cool, so flashy everyone would involuntarily go ooh on sight. Tony, you okay over there? Need backup? Banner's voice came in over the public channel. What's there to worry about? The little hell things are adorable. Jarvis and I both like them a lot. Tony walked toward the spatial portal. Strange creatures kept pouring through it, but Mark X had turned into a meat grinder. Every hell creature that emerged was immediately devoured. The scene was grotesquely comical. Demons like fish in a basin, rolling eyes, lining up as if to jump into a frying pan. Banner, I've got this side. You and the sorcerers should support the other two temples, Tony said. The fights were happening inside the mirror dimension, so Banner couldn't see the 3 temple battlefields on the projection screens anymore. Fortunately, the sorcerers were linking reality and the mirror dimension with the mystic art of portals, so strategic retreats were still possible and communications were intact. Banner's voice carried mild concern. Sure, you're not just putting on a brave front? This isn't the time for stubbornness, Tony. Everyone knew Tony was stubborn. He bristled. Banner, it's fine. I can handle these little guys. I promise. What about you, Wang? Banner asked. No, I'm fine here too. That boy Leon brought. Pietro, right? He's something else, Wang answered. Hong Kong Temple. As usual, the bloodline wizards struck first when the hell demons appeared. They unleashed a long green stream of magic, but it only felled 2 demons. Wang quickly assessed the situation. Conventional wizardry worked best on humans, but these hell creatures required white magic with special attack bonuses. He ordered the sorcerers to split into control, defense, and assault teams and began extending the battle line. Then Pietro, armed with a magical dagger, suddenly dashed out of formation. Wang blinked. Had the kid abandoned the line to attack or flee? Pietro's figure blurred. Only brief, illusory shadows flickered in and out. Hey kid, Leon told you to follow me so you'd listen to my comm. What are you doing? Wang started to scold. Pietro reappeared in front of him, casually twirling the dagger in his palm. Done, he said, bouncing on his toes like he'd just finished warming up. Done with what? Wang frowned. There was something not simple about this kid. Pietro pointed toward the spatial portal. All the demons that had been leaping and charging were frozen in place, hacking and gasping as though some rusted organ in their chests had seized. They clutched at their pale throats. Across each neck ran a long, ghastly wound. Purple and green blood spurted in reckless fountains. Ordinarily, such wounds wouldn't stop a demon, but a faint golden energy flickered over each cut, stopping the wounds from healing. That's Vishanti's enchantment energy. You used the dagger to slit all their throats? Wang stared at Pietro in horror. When Pietro first arrived at Camartage, he'd seemed ordinary. After one training session with Leon, he was suddenly almost superhuman. Wang's imagination ran away with him. Maybe he should go to Leon's room tonight and apprentice under him. Hey, don't space out. Pietro shook Wang, hauling him from his apprentice fantasy. Some of them are recovering, and more are coming out. Oh, right! Wang snapped back to reality. The dagger's enchantment won't kill them outright. Move, everyone. Finish them while they're still held. Wang formed seals, called down Vishanti's holy sword, and charged, shouting as the energy blade swung. Pietro's throat slits had stalled the demons. Sorcerers moved in and finished them. The battle quickly fell into a grim routine. Demons appeared, Pietro cut their throats, the sorcerers finished them off. The whole Hong Kong field became an assembly line slaughterhouse. It was so efficient it bordered on absurd. Wang's hand went numb from the endless strikes, the energy sword beginning to dull from severing more heads in minutes than many executioners saw in a lifetime. On the other side of the portal, the hell creatures grew timid and finally refused to cross further. When Banner checked in, Wang could honestly report he felt no pressure. "I've got Pietro here, so we're fine. You all go support Mordo," he said. Pietro grinned. "Yeah, Wang and I have this. Also, call me Quicksilver from now on. Leon says it fits." After that fight, Pietro understood just how much he'd changed, for once had no complaint about Leon's brutal training. He even felt grateful. The nickname really did suit him. Banner stroked his chin, considering. "Quicksilver, huh? Sounds fast. Hong Kong can handle itself for now." Wanda, standing next to him, tapped her forehead and sighed inwardly. Her naive little brother was definitely broken in by Leon. When Leon returned, that idiot would try to steal credit for what he'd done. Banner glanced at the last temple. "Mordo, how's your side? Need. My Vishanti, finally." Mordo's voice broke with relieved urgency. "London needs backup. Come quick. The octopus monsters here mentally erode you. There are too many of them." Mordo's plea spilled out, years of frustration compressed into one breath. He and the sorcerers had been battered by the giant octopi for a long time and had been dying to ask for help. But Banner had checked on New York and Hong Kong first, and both had handled the invasion. Mordo had stubbornly clung on, hoping to hold his pride and wait for Banner to turn to them. Now his relief was plain as he begged for support. Need. Support? Banner flinched, then hurried to strip off his outer garments. "I'm on my way." Wanda brightened. "Let me go. I'm good with mental stuff." She rolled up her sleeves eagerly, determined to prove herself. If Pietro could handle hell demons, she could handle dimensional creatures. After all, they all trained under Leon. She wasn't about to let Pietro have all the glory. Before Wanda could step into the fixed teleportation portal for the London Temple, Banner slapped himself twice across the chest. "Hulk!" he bellowed. The Hulk roared, vaulted over Wanda with one towering step, and leapt straight into the portal. Wanda stood there, arms folded, stunned and exasperated as Hulk vanished. Her face fell into a scowl of betrayed indignation. Chapter 183. Zhang Wanda's first battle banner had at least learned astral projection. For now, he could push his consciousness out of his body when he became the Hulk. What he couldn't do yet was separate Hulk's mind from the body, and if the Hulk was in control, Banner couldn't get back inside. Leon had explained that Banner's mutation made his soul more stable than a normal person's. Even so, Banner was relieved. At least now, when he turned into the Hulk, he could watch from the sidelines. If the Hulk started to lose control, Banner could step in and try to steer him. He no longer vanished entirely, no longer lost all awareness or his memory whenever he transformed. Hulk had just stomped through 2 portals and burst into the mirror dimension, with Banner's drifting consciousness bobbing beside him and shouting orders. "Quick, quick, do you see that big octopus over there, Hulk? Deal with it." The mirror dimension was a disaster. A few sorcerers stood like statues, mouths slack, drool at their chins. Clearly their minds had been eroded. The rest clung to sanity by their teeth. There were no bodies yet, but the situation in the London sanctum was critical. Master Mordo himself was wrapped in tentacles from a massive octopus and being swung around like a rag doll, cursing between helpless flails. Banner pointed at the octopus dragging Mordo. "Take that one, Hulk!" Hulk snorted and ignored him. He glanced at Banner with a look of impatient dismissal, then leapt up and raised both fists to smash a different octopus. "Wrong direction," Banner scolded, feet stomping in frustration as he floated. "It's that one, not this one." Hulk just ignored the instruction. He grabbed one of the big octopus's tentacles, yanked it free, and swung it up like a hammer. Planting his feet, he pivoted, built momentum, and flung it hard. The tentacle arced through the air and smashed into the octopus that was swinging Mordo. The two creatures collided, tumbled into a spun ball, and Mordo was finally tossed free. "Nice job, Hulk," Banner cheered, relief breaking into his voice. The Hulk hadn't followed orders, but the result was good enough. Banner pictured the Hulk like one of those unruly magical creatures, an irrumpent, powerful, and stubborn. You had to go with their motion or get crushed. Maybe that was the way to handle him. "So powerful, Hulk. Thanks to you, the crisis is eased. Leon will look at us differently now." Banner flattered, eager. Hulk didn't react to the praise, his gaze fixed on the remaining octopuses, and with a guttural roar, he leaped and prepared to slam down in a tornado-like smash. Then a clear female voice cut through the noise. "Rise." Dozens of the octopuses froze as a crimson energy washed over them. They rose up, helpless, tentacles pinned as if by invisible bonds. Hulk landed hard and looked up, baffled. How could he fight them now? Banner tracked the voice. At the entrance to the mirror dimension, where the other sorcerers had come through, stood Wanda, scarlet energy spiraling around her hands. She had simply raised her voice and controlled those dimensional beings. Banner slapped a hand to his forehead. If he'd known that this young woman was that powerful, why had he turned into the Hulk at all? He'd wasted a pair of pants for nothing. "Dimensional beings, go back to your own dimension," Wanda said, flicking her wrist. The octopus-like creatures suddenly uncoiled and burst into fiber-like ribbons. Under Leon's guidance, Wanda had already begun to use chaos magic to alter reality. After dispersing the creatures in the air, she pushed her hands toward the portal and tried to close it. The portal's dimensional energy was dense, stubborn. It resisted her attempts, and new creatures kept pouring through. Wanda couldn't force the portal closed by herself. She didn't have the time to peel the dimensional energy apart. She had to hold the opening. "I'll have to leave the internal work to Leon when he gets here," she thought, settling into a defensive posture. Wanda stood between the sanctum and the portal, handling each emerging creature with a snap of her fingers. As the sorcerers whose minds had been partially erased began to come back to themselves, they watched in stunned silence. Every snap meant another dimensional being destroyed. They blinked. Whose ally was this woman? Where had she come from, and why was she so fearless? While the three sanctums fought a white-hot battle across dimensions and hell, another confrontation was unfolding inside the World Ring. Leon and Dormammu had reached a critical point. Their fight escalated from throwing planetary masses at each other, meteors against cosmic barriers, to a pure energy war. Dormammu spewed dimensional beams from his eyes, mouth, and palms at once. Leon met them with searing heat rays and the space-warping energy of the Space Stone, blasting and reflecting attacks back like a titanic beam clash. They tore across the continent, from coastlines to heartland, splitting mountains and carving canyons. The land itself shrank. A continent-sized region lost a tenth of its volume in the exchange. Dormammu tried every trick, dimensional magic, dark arts, elemental assaults, but he couldn't break Leon's defenses. Worse for Dormammu, the exchanges shredded his body and again. In the end, he abandoned finesse and lunged in, both fists driving toward Leon. They closed into brutal hand-to-hand combat. Leon treated Dormammu like a punching bag, no, like a baseball, catching and sending him flying with each blow. Leon's Dormammu suit automatically reduced the force of any attack to a 10,000th of its original power, so even assaults that could have destroyed a star left Leon only rearranged nearby mountains. He would fly back, land among rubble, and when he reappeared, he was unscathed. Dormammu paid the cost. Recoil threw him back too, but he returned with missing limbs and open wounds. After one exchange, both his arms were gone. Dormammu's physical makeup could never match Lion's. Dormammu drew almost all his power from dimensional energy, and Lion had used the Space Stone to seal off the small world, cutting him off from the dark dimension. Each time Dormammu used his power, it left him weaker. In a drawn-out fight, he would only ebb away. Lion, by contrast, grew stronger with every blow. His blows landed harder. His grasp of the laws of the universe seemed to sharpen mid-battle. Dormammu did not know that Lion carried the sun with him, that under its light, Lion healed astonishingly quickly. All Dormammu felt was exhaustion mounting. After burning through an attack that could have destroyed a star, he was left hollowed out, batted around the cosmos like a foul ball by Lion's relentless strikes. And yet Dormammu refused to yield. He hauled himself up from the wreckage, bloodied and reconstituting slowly. Dormammu, perhaps it's time we talked, Lion said, hovering above him, cape snapping in an alien wind. I have nothing to talk about with you, Dormammu snarled. I appreciate the resolve, Lion said with a shrug. Enjoy the next act. He shot upward across the continent and vanished into the dark. Dormammu watched him go, frowning. What trick did the Sorcerer Supreme intend? Then, without warning, a colossal humanoid folded into view, an immense figure 1,000 kilometers tall. Beside it, Dormammu's few hundred meters were no more than dust. This is a celestial? Dormammu murmured, puzzled. The form didn't quite match what he knew of the Celestials, but its face drew closer, strangely familiar. The giant squatted, opened its palm, and plucked Dormammu up. As the face filled his vision, Dormammu realized with dawning alarm that the expression belonged to the Sorcerer Supreme himself. The giant did not answer. It smiled, and a searing light coalesced around its body, materialized energy. Dormammu's flames flared hotter. You're going to self-destruct? Wait. Before the word finished, the gigantic figure detonated. Holding Dormammu in that palm, it detonated on the spot. The compressed energy of a planet erupted, space itself twisted at the blast's center. Light, particles, gales of energy spun like a vast, magnified Rasengan. Lion drifted down from high above and exhaled, sending a gust washing through the crater. For a long moment, the aftershocks rumbled before the blast settled. When the dust cleared, a chasm tens of thousands of kilometers wide gaped in the continent. At the bottom, Dormammu lay half buried in rubble, only his head and torso intact, groaning as he reknit himself. The small clones formed by the Blood Sea are excellent for self-destruction, Lion observed, satisfied. He had controlled that 1,000-kilometer shell with his consciousness. The detonation had been instant and painless. Great destructive yield, minimal backlash. The small clone was essentially a portable superbomb. At higher power, he mused, a clone's self-destruction might even birth a black hole. Inside his inner world, Lion formed another Blood Sea small clone and manifested it into space. He took out clone after clone, another colossal form, another detonation. He learned to sequence the explosions, sending them at Dormammu as the demon stitched himself back together. Dormammu healed just enough each time for Lion to hurl another self-destructing colossus. Dozens of detonations later, the single continent, millions of kilometers across, had been shattered into 5 separate landmasses. At last, Lion ceased. From one of the ruined fragments, Dormammu dragged himself up, trembling, and reached a scorched hand through the rubble. We need to talk, he said weakly. The fury that had driven him was gone. Exhaustion and a cold, brittle calm replaced it. Lion hovered over him, silent. What is there to talk about? He asked. As long as you don't invoke the authority of the dark dimension, say whatever you like. Dormammu pushed the debris off his gaunt chest and lay staring into the black. After a long moment, he spoke. I cannot give you dimensional authority, but I can let the sorcerers of Kamar-Taj draw on my power without charge. You mean the sorcerers who worship the Vishanti can use dark magic? Lion scoffed, but his tone shifted as he thought it through. Does that include me? Yes. Dormammu's voice was flat. You are the Sorcerer Supreme. You, too, may borrow from the dark dimension. Lion nodded. Access to that well of energy without cost would solve the starvation problem of the later Starry Sky system. He could drain entire universes if he wanted. The dark dimension's energy at no price would carry him to multiversal stature and beyond. He hid his calculations skillfully. Good, Lion said. That's one condition. What else? Dormammu's embers flickered darker. Else? Isn't that enough? You're the vanquished party. You must cede territory and pay reparations. Lion's voice was dispassionate. You've paid reparations. Where's the ceded territory? Dormammu's flames dimmed an angry red. He spat. You still want my dimensional authority. He was suddenly defiant. Better kill me now if you mean to take it. But mark me, protect Earth. If I return to the dark dimension and die and resurrect there. You threaten me? Lion asked, jaw tightening. Dormammu tensed, then curled inward. Lion jumped and punched down hard against Dormammu's face. The demon cried out and went suddenly submissive. "You dare threaten me?" Lion said coldly. After the blow, Dormammu's tone changed. He became urgent. "Resurrection takes time. Many Hell Lords watch the Dark Dimension hungrily. If I perish and try to come back, they will be upon my realm. Perhaps even Mephisto will seize it before I return." "You suppose that after you die a single time, you will still have the strength to hold them off?" Lion replied. "Or that you'll even be able to reincarnate before they do?" Dormammu fell silent and then, as if tasting a safer avenue, gave another offer. "If you let me go back now, I will help Strange and Clea. Strange of your main universe, on this timeline, is working with my niece Clea in the Dark Dimension to resolve a world collision crisis. If I am not there and Hell Lords come, their plan will fail." Lion narrowed his eyes. "A universe collision? How does it occur, and how are they trying to fix it? Explain." Dormammu spread his hands helplessly. "It's a world collision created by that Strange's reckless traversals through parallel universes. He has disrupted multiversal order. The simplest fix would be to destroy one of the universes. But Strange and Clea are attempting something else. They are doing something in secret in the Dark Dimension. If you allow me to return at once, I can assist them," Dormammu promised. "Help them finish it, and by doing so, help your universe too." Chapter 185, Contract Establishment. Lion's expression darkened. The post-credits scene at the end of Doctor Strange 2 showed Strange and Clea entering the Dark Dimension to deal with a world collision crisis. In his old life, as an ordinary viewer, that scene would have just built anticipation for what came next. Now that he was actually inside the Marvel Cinematic Universe, anticipation was the last thing he felt. He wanted to curse. If the so-called world collision only involved the movie's main universe and one other universe, he wouldn't care. There were countless parallel worlds in Marvel, ones collapsed and remade every day. Over a year, it could be more than the number of kangaroos in Australia. If one main universe was destroyed, another would simply take its place. Maybe the 1U66 universe he occupied would become the new main universe. But when had the concept of a world collision last appeared in the Marvel mythos? In the comics, it was Secret Wars 2015. That disaster began when Wolverine's time travel altered history, triggering a cascade of collisions across the entire multiverse. The result wasn't just a disaster for one world, it wiped out the whole comic multiverse. The crisis finally ended only when the surviving Reed Richards recreated a new universe. In other words, that kind of world collision amounted to a reboot of the entire multiverse. Lion felt his scalp prickle. If the world collision Doctor Strange was facing turned out to be anything like Secret Wars, he needed to prepare for his universe's demise now. The odds might be low, but he had to be ready. He decided to get Dormammu out of the small world as fast as possible and stop bargaining. Better to let Strange solve things in the main universe. He had no intention of personally plunging into the Dark Dimension. If the crisis was truly cosmic, his presence wouldn't matter. If it wasn't, then his world wouldn't be affected. What mattered was becoming stronger. If his power reached a certain level, he wouldn't have to fear the destruction of a universe. Even the entire Omniverse would be no concern. The urgency he'd felt in the Starry Sky world returned. "Dormammu, you can go," Lion said, "but besides borrowing infinite energy, I have two more conditions." He raised two fingers. Dormammu's voice emanated, bored and arrogant. "I accept any number of conditions, but no rude orders. I will not be compelled." "My first condition is this," Lion said. "I don't want your dimensional authority, but you must help me find an ownerless dimension." "Impossible," Dormammu snapped before Lion could finish. "Do you know how precious an ownerless dimension is? The moment one appears, a dimensional demon god will seize it. Or, as Lion knew, Dormammu himself would swallow it into the Dark Dimension. Then just keep an eye out for news of ownerless dimensions," Lion amended. "Whether the tips are accurate or not, you must tell me until I find one." When Lion broke through to immortality, his inner world would become an external divine kingdom. But that required a space fragment to integrate his inner world into. In the Marvel cosmos, the most suitable method was to fuse his world with an ownerless dimension and become a dimensional lord. Dormammu sighed, relieved. "Fine, that's acceptable. Passing on information costs me nothing." And the second condition, Lion continued, after you leave, you must help Doctor Strange and the others overcome the crisis. If they fail, you must tell me immediately. No problem. That's trivial, Dormammu brightened, suddenly interested. So you plan to intervene if something goes wrong? No, I want to watch two universes collide and be destroyed, Dormammu said bluntly. For a moment, Lion felt colder than anything Dormammu could muster. Dormammu, too, thought Lion was heartless. Are you really the Sorcerer Supreme? The darkest Strange I've seen would at least feign sympathy. You really like talking about Strange, Lion said. Sign the contract, and you can go back to the Dark Dimension to find him. Lion extended his hand. A golden contract of condensed energy unfurled and rapidly grew to hundreds of meters long. Magical runes densely recorded the three agreed conditions. At the bottom, in runes that glowed with grave authority, was the unilateral penalty clause. If Dormammu breached the contract, he would have to surrender 90% of his dimensional authority to the Vishanti, the contract's witness. Dormammu scoffed. He had no intention of breaking their agreement and saw no trap, but the penalty was steep. 90%? Even the Vishanti would be tempted by that. Sorcerer Supreme, you are truly pessimistic. If the penalty wasn't that high, they wouldn't enforce it. This magic contract wouldn't bind you otherwise, Lion replied with a faint smile. Humph, fine. Dormammu signed the contract with a smear of dimensional energy. The golden parchment flared and vanished where it had lain. Very well, the contract is established. Lion waved and retracted the space stone energy that had been enveloping the small world. You may leave. Azure energy flooded Lion like a tide as the connection severed. Dormammu felt the pull of the dark dimension and paused long enough to gloat. He stared at Lion. Sorcerer Supreme, tell me your name, he asked from the threshold. Wasn't it written on the contract? Lion raised a brow. What, are you going to threaten me? Dormammu sneered and returned to his imperious posture. Lion Stark, I await the day you come to the dark dimension. We will have much to discuss. Thanks for the invitation, Lion said dryly. Just remember to honor the contract. That's your defeat clause. Dormammu bristled. Demonic beings who lived their long lives in cold, dark dimensions had abandoned ordinary morality long ago. Lion's curt dismissal barely registered. I do not need your reminders, he said, and tore open space to step into the riotous chaos beyond. Hey, if you miss me, come to Earth and see me again. Remember this universe's designation, 199999S. Lion shouted after him. At the sound of that designation, Dormammu's head dipped, and he hurried away as if burned. The rupture closed, and the dark dimension detached completely from the small world. Leon looked over the ruined continent. It's a mess, he said aloud. Then, with a thought, he left the world ring. In a flash, Leon was back in the Camartage library. He casually dispelled the wards protecting the world ring and tucked the ring away into his inner world. Then his powerful mental presence unfurled, passing through two portals. He glimpsed the mirror dimension as it had unfolded across the three sanctums and saw what was happening in each place. In the London sanctum, Wanda was single-handedly holding one flank while other sorcerers cheered her on. Hulk sat to the side, chin propped, sulking. At the Hong Kong temple, Quicksilver and Wong worked together to cut down demons. The New York sanctum was different. The mirror dimension had expanded until the sanctum felt infinite, and a mark armor hundreds of meters tall sat on the ground. Countless mycelial tendrils extended from it, completely blocking the hell passage, and some strands even reached into the passage itself, wreaking havoc in the world beyond. As expected of an Avenger, they had fought their way straight into the enemy's lair. That the Hell side tolerated Tony's rampage made one thing clear: its master wasn't present. He must have gone to the dark dimension to pick over scraps. But Dormammu himself had already retreated into the dark dimension. It seemed likely that the Hell Master would soon be driven back as well. Leon reached into his inner world and drew out space stone energy. He sent it surging through the portals, carrying part of his power through the spatial passages and dispersing it into the worlds on the other side of the three rifts. The spatial energy detonated in a roaring blast. Countless hell and interdimensional creatures were obliterated, and the spatial passages themselves were destroyed. The war is over. Everyone worked hard. Leon's voice echoed through the three sanctums. Whether fighting or watching, the sorcerer's eyes lit up in unison. They all knew Leon had gone to confront Dormammu. His return meant Dormammu had left. Earth was safe. I destroyed the spatial passages opened by the other dimensions. You can all come back now. Leon's voice carried a soothing authority. The sorcerers operating the mirror dimension ended their spells one by one. The mirrors shattered. Reality reasserted itself. The groups reassembled and stepped back through the portal to Kamartaj. The same sorcerers who had gathered a month earlier when the Ancient One died were together again. Leon had Wong and Mordo lead everyone to the training grounds to rest. Half an hour later, the sorcerers sat cross-legged on the grass, their eyes bright and eager, fixed on Leon. The Ancient One's passing had left them bereft, like a night without its guiding moon. Leon's steady presence felt like a new and blazing sun. They wanted to hear how their new Sorcerer Supreme had driven Dormammu away. But Leon didn't launch into a battle narrative. Instead, he produced a giant octopus from his inner world. "From your faces, I see a craving for good food," he said with a smile. In a few deft gestures, he set up a barbecue grill. "Then the second Kamartaj barbecue feast begins now. Anyone want to stand up and sing? Old rule, first piece of grilled meat goes to the best singer." The sudden ordinariness nearly stunned everyone into silence. Then they scrambled to their feet. Me! I practiced singing for a month while I was away. This will be great." For Kamartaj's mages, where casting spells took a real toll on the body, there was nothing more restorative after battle than a good meal. After a month apart, their singing had improved too. Even Hamir, who'd sung the Ching Jing last time, now belted out a rousing version of "The River Flows East." It was still a little down to earth, but at least he was singing. Amid the music and dancing, Tony and a few others clustered near Leon to eat and gossip. "This octopus is amazing. Send some to my place later," Tony said, holding a tentacle several dozen centimeters long. "If you please," Wong raised his hand. The floating soul of Banner, hovering near Hulk, nodded vigorously. "And me, I haven't had any yet." Hulk, who rarely came out, refused to go to sleep now that he had an octopus leg in each hand. Pietro raised his own hand weakly. Want some too?" "All right, all of you can have some." "I've plenty," Leon agreed. "You had a lot, but didn't share before." Tony bumped Leon with his shoulder. "Also, if you hadn't closed the spatial passage just now, I would have fought my way through hell." He was there to claim credit. Wanda lifted her chin. "I handled all the big octopuses by myself." Hulk, still chewing, turned his back and continued gnawing in silence. Mordo scowled. "Can we not talk about octopuses? What we ate back there was disgusting." He couldn't forget being flung around by a tentacle monster. No one paid him much mind. I wasn't bad either. Every one of those demons had their throat slit by me." Pietro wiped his nose and tried to sound modest. Wong countered, "But I did most of the finishing blows." Everyone around Leon looked hungry for praise. "I see that," Leon said, gesturing. "You all made contributions. Each of your skills helped win the fight." He didn't leave out Hulk or Mordo. Hulk's emotions were unusually stable this time. That was impressive. "Mordo, you handled the Eye Demon's mind-affecting minions well. That took a lot of effort." Instantly, they relaxed at the praise. Pietro especially kept eating while secretly smiling from ear to ear. Being complimented by the Sorcerer Supreme, by this calm, capable younger brother, felt good. Leon's expression grew serious. "But those dimensional creatures, those hell demons, we face them at their lowest level. Dimensional demon gods and hell lords exist at the level of Dormammu or higher. You'll need to get stronger if you want to protect Earth." He wanted them to feel the urgency of a potential multiverse crisis. Those who hadn't yet seen a dimensional demon god didn't have a real sense of the danger. "Speaking of Dormammu," Tony said, rubbing his chin, "how strong is he? How exactly did you make him retreat?" The gathered sorcerers leaned in to listen. Leon smiled. "Telling is boring. Why don't we watch it?" He flicked a bottle of water into the air and with a few gestures shaped it into a shimmering screen. Then he touched his forehead, drew out a thin, glowing blue thread of memory, and laid it across the surface. The projection shimmered to life, an image of his memory, a pensieve-like replay ready to show them the truth. The liquid screen rippled and slowly revealed a colorful image. It looked like an ordinary two-dimensional display ready to play a real video. But this was magic, more than a simple projection. The moment the image settled, everyone present felt a dizzying tug, as if a giant hand had seized their souls, yanked them free of their bodies, and shoved them into the scene. It was like being roughly handled from head to toe. When the masters came to, annoyance flared for a moment. Then, seeing the scene before them, all other feelings were shoved aside. Hundreds of masters floated in midair with no visible support, a few meters above Sorcerer Supreme Leon and the traitor Caecilius, who were conversing below. They had slipped into Leon's memory. The Hulk didn't understand what was happening. He roared and, with Banner screaming beside him, leaped toward Caecilius, only to pass straight through him. They could look, but they could not touch or interfere. Tony scanned the alien landscape with curiosity. He had to admit it, this was his first time off Earth. Even the two worlds he'd been to with Leon before had both been on Earth. Leon's getting better stuff and better places. Has he been crossing worlds on his own? He muttered, stroking his chin. Shh, Pietro snapped, putting a finger to his lips. Be quiet. I can't hear them. The crowd's chatter had been ruining the immersion. The masters noticed and quickly fell silent. On the desolate plain of rolling yellow sand, only Leon and Caecilius's voices carried. The immersion sharpened until it felt like they were there. Caecilius went on, enumerating the benefits of the dark dimension, even claiming the air there was sweeter. The masters felt a disgust so acute it was almost physical. They assumed Leon would teach the traitor a lesson. Then, impossibly, they watched Leon step to Caecilius's side. Every face in the air went slack. If this memory had been shown to them without explanation, many would have shouted curses and sworn they were ready to die for him. The story, mercifully, took another turn. The scene developed like a pulse-pounding film. Caecilius and his followers summoned Dormammu and were mercilessly consumed by the dark dimension. Leon said he wanted to negotiate, and the move enraged Dormammu. Everyone leaned in. They had heard Dormammu's name before, but this was the first time they saw him. His head alone was as tall as a small mountain. The sheer presence he gave off could steal a person's breath and give the sensation of meeting death itself. Watching the Sorcerer Supreme stand before such a being felt like watching Don Quixote charge a windmill. Tony's hands clenched until his knuckles whitened, his fingertips digging into his palms. Fear rose in him, closely followed by anxiety and a craving for power, an urgent, selfish wish to be able to do something. He knew, somewhere deep down, that Leon must survive this memory, but seeing Dormammu's true form planted a hard seed of dread in his chest. Wanda, standing nearby, felt equally small. In front of Dormammu, she didn't even dare cast a spell. Yet Leon met the godlike being with a frown and calm competence, raising the Seraphim shield and invoking Hoggoth's ancient spells to deflect fatal blows. Watching him, Wanda felt anew the vast gulf between her and the Sorcerer Supreme. Wong was less restrained. He slapped his thigh and exclaimed, "This is the Sorcerer Supreme. This is what the Sorcerer Supreme looks like." Leon's back, the way he held himself, was burned into every witness's memory, but their relief didn't last. After a few exchanges, Leon again pushed Dormammu too far. Dormammu, furious, stepped out of the dark dimension in his true form. They all winced. Leon was powerful, but his mouth was always getting him into trouble. Wouldn't it have been better to coax Dormammu away rather than force him to cross dimensions in full? More than one person wished they could travel back and clamp a hand over Leon's mouth. Dormammu and Leon's argument turned to the Time Stone and to a name that rang cold in everyone's ears, Thanos. Wanda frowned and nudged Tony. "What is the Time Stone? Leon used the Space Stone to awaken Pietro and me. Is this the same kind of thing? And who is Thanos? What is annihilation?" Wanda had only recently come into the wider world. These names sounded fantastic and terrible. She assumed Tony and the older masters had fought these battles before. But Tony had the same blankness in him. He looked to Wong and Mordo. Both men shook their heads. Wong gave a quick, breathy explanation of Thanos and the Infinity Stones, then admitted with a sheepish expression, "But when the Time Stone was destroyed, what annihilation is, I don't know." Mordo frowned. "That's not right. The Time Stone is in the Eye of Agamotto. Did Leon destroy that sacred relic as soon as he took the title?" Wanda absorbed this and realized the elders weren't omniscient either. Pietro, impatient, leaned forward. Lower your voices. We'll find out if we keep watching, he said, staring at Leon as if the noise around him were the only distraction. They returned their attention to the memory. What they saw next sank their hearts. Dormammu struck Leon aside and unleashed torrents of devastation, earthquakes, gales, floods, fires, wiping the world's surface with surging energy. The scope was apocalyptic. Hundreds of observers hovered silently in the air. The image of total annihilation drained their minds to numbness. How could Leon possibly win now? A voice trembled from the crowd. The Sorcerer Supreme we just saw? Could he have been a ghost? After a long pause, another voice answered, flat with disbelief. Then the octopus we ate, was that just a dying hallucination? Doubt rippled through them. Some checked their own pulse, as if to be sure they were still alive. Their relief held only until revered Lion reappeared. They watched him stride out of the roaring wind and the fire-wreathed rift, cape snapping, utterly unharmed. The sorcerers exhaled in unison, and then their certainty shattered. At first, Dormammu lashed out relentlessly, but revered Lion barely moved. He mocked the dimensional demon for a beat, then with a single punch felled him. Then he destroyed the planet beneath Dormammu's feet, a world no smaller than Earth. The exploding planet's flames washed over them like an ocean. Everywhere was blinding fire and a storm of flying rock. Yet the image that burned into their minds was simple and impossible to forget. Revered Lion landing that punch and annihilating a world. "Is this our Sorcerer Supreme?" someone murmured. He is, right?" another voice stammered. "Would the Ancient One have been this strong?" "No, if the Ancient One had shown up, she'd probably be gone with one hit from him." "Is that even magic?" "It looks like magic. Isn't this how we fight?" The sorcerers traded stunned whispers. Tony and the others near them were no better. "Holy hell, is that Lion?" Tony muttered. "What did he go through to be able to blow up a planet?" Pietro watched revered Lion's back in the firelight, his eyes alight, an expression that simply said, "This is how a man should be." Wanda stared blankly too. Dormammu had seemed unstoppable a moment ago, and now he looked diminished, petty. Maybe it was revered Lion's presence, the black battlesuit hunched over his frame like war gear, the dark cloth tracing muscle and motion that gave everyone a ridiculous sense of security. Pietro had been right. Lion's physique was astonishing, more sculpted than any Renaissance statue she'd seen. Once revered Lion got serious, the battle became a Hollywood spectacle. Light waves tore across the landscape as the two clashed, civilizations of rock shattered and reformed, their fight alternating between horrific displays of power and brutal, intimate strikes. Time and again, revered Lion sent Dormammu flying as if batting a stray ball. He even summoned a giant and detonated it. The magnitude of the power and the sheer incomprehensibility of the fight sent the sorcerer's emotions to a fever pitch. Then the memory ended. Everyone blinked back to reality and stood in silence for several long beats. Revered Lion's demonstration had rattled them. Their feelings rose and fell like a roller coaster. The finale in particular left hearts pounding. Living through Lion's perspective felt like they themselves had struck Dormammu over and over, savoring the triumph. Revered Lion waited until the daze persisted, then coughed lightly. "Don't just stand there. You saw the process. Hurry up and eat the barbecue. It'll taste worse if it gets cold." Those words snapped them back as if from another world. Hundreds of eyes turned to him, and what had been respect and trust shifted into hot, reverent admiration. Nearly every sorcerer looked at him like a prophet. Even the Hulk stared with wide, incredulous eyes, glancing from Lion's arms to his own, and unable to understand how a seemingly slight man could be so strong. "Why are you all staring? Eat!" Lion held up 2 skewers of grilled octopus tentacles. Instead of grabbing food, the sorcerers surged toward him. "Revered Lion, I don't know what to say. You're incredible. You beat Dormammu with your own hands. With you, we don't have to fear dimensional demon gods. Now our Earth will be the strongest of the 9 realms. Revered Lion, what was that body-strengthening magic you used? Teach me." They crowded him, pressing and prodding. Lion tried to keep order. "One at a time. Don't push. If you push again, you'll all be sent back to your sanctums." He couldn't help a small, pleased swell of pride. A familiar joy, the old thrill of showing off, surfaced in him. What's the point of getting stronger if not to feel it, to protect others, and occasionally to show off a little? He'd tempered that urge since returning from the starry sky world, but a little flex now and then felt harmless, until hands started groping. "Hey, whose hand just touched my chest? The one with the cat ears, I know you," he barked. "And you, Minotaur. I've put up with you for a while. You pinched my biceps and twisted them. What do you think you're doing?" Some of the new magic disciples were a bit perverse. While most asked questions respectfully, these ones took advantage of the crowd to fondle him. Lion handed out a swift knock on the head to each offender, lining them up with new bumps on their skulls like ping-pong balls. The rest settled into questions. The Q&A drifted, as it tends to, into a lecture. Lion spent 2 hours explaining how to borrow energy, the essence of magic, the new principles behind their system. The sorcerers left richer in knowledge and worn in spirit, each with a satisfied smile. Night fell. The sorcerers from the 3 sanctums dispersed. Kamartaj's station returned to its quiet routine. This was their life. When a crisis rose, they met it. Once it passed, they went back beneath the surface of a prosperous world. No one on the streets would suspect that a circle of robed figures had just prevented an apocalypse. But this time would be different. Revered Lion's name and his improbable deeds would echo through the magical community. After the last sorcerer left, Tony and the others finally had time with Lion. "All right," Lion said. "The dimensional war is over for now. Everyone can go home." He produced several vials, potions that contained combat memories, and handed them to Mordo. "Mordo, toss these into those invading hells. Let them see for themselves." Mordo paused, then straightened with purpose. "As a deterrent, right? I understand." Having witnessed Lion's brutal replay of Dormammu, Mordo, Kamartaj's diplomatic envoy, felt a new confidence. "Should I throw one into the Eye Demon's realm too?" he asked. It still felt insufficient. Lion glanced at him. "Forget the Eye Demon. He rarely invades Earth. It would be foolish to provoke him. Best to keep a healthy distance from anything Cthulhu-like." Also, although Dormammu promised that Kamartaj could draw on his power without limit in the future, Leon continued, looking at Wong, who stood nearby, "you two still need to warn the other sorcerers not to use the Dark Dimension's energy except in the most desperate moments." Wong nodded. "Even if there's no direct cost, that kind of power erodes the mind." "I don't want to come back one day and find a nest of extremist fanatics," Leon said. Mordo's expression was grave. "With Caecilius as an example, I trust the sorcerers will be careful. I will oversee them constantly." "Mordo's right," Wong agreed. "Not many people will deliberately reach for Dormammu's magic." He pointed toward the library with a teasing smile. "Not everyone is as reckless as you, reading every forbidden book in the stacks, are they?" Leon squinted. "Wong, here we go again, always bringing up me and the forbidden books. If you're looking for blame, blame the Ancient One. She let me." At the mention of the Ancient One, both Wong and Mordo softened. The Ancient One, the Sorcerer Supreme, Mordo sighed. Only Leon knew that the Ancient One had secretly used Dark Dimension energy. To most of them, she remained a saintly, formidable figure. "I wonder how she fares with the Vishanti," Mordo said quietly. Leon cleared his throat. "It's different for her. The bargain the sorcerers made meant their souls would return to the Vishanti after death. The Ancient One was an exception. Her soul didn't go to the Vishanti. She sought eternity instead. She's at peace." "Eternity?" Wong and Mordo both looked surprised, and then, as if the thought settled, content. "As befits the Ancient One," Wong murmured. A being like her following something even greater made sense. Tony, who'd been listening, leaned in. "So the previous Sorcerer Supreme was that powerful?" "She was the venerable sorcerer who guarded Kamartaj for centuries," Mordo said, eyes distant as he recounted her deeds to Tony. Wong filled in other details. Leon shook his head and turned to look at Bruce. After the barbecue and all the octopus had been devoured, the Hulk had collapsed into a deep sleep and Bruce Banner had regained control. He sat awkwardly, looking a little sheepish. Leon rested a hand on Bruce's shoulder. "Bruce, want to come back to New York with us? You've learned astral projection. You've met your first goal." Bruce shook his head. "No, I'm not where I need to be yet. I should stay and keep learning. Besides, Kamartaj's magical animal breeding facility is under construction. I want to keep an eye on it." "What about Betty? Don't you miss her?" Leon asked. Bruce scratched his head. "Could I bring Betty here? She's a biologist. She'd love the creatures. You can talk to Wong and Mordo about it. They're stewarding Kamartaj now, Leon said, passing the responsibility with a half smile. He turned his attention to the Maximov twins, who were standing a little too close. Someone's hands, two different skin tones, had been stroking his chest like curious children. When Leon turned his head, Wanda immediately made a tiny animal noise, snatched her hands back, and went red. Pietro, unable to contain himself after seeing the battle memories, was grinning and still had a hand on Leon. As expected of Superman, "Your muscles are incredible," Pietro gushed, giving a thumbs up. He had watched Leon's past battles and elevated him back to idol status. He couldn't help reaching out to feel those muscles and had even egged Wanda on. Leon felt a flush of irritation rather than pride. "Pietro, if you keep looking at me with those groundhog eyes, I'll turn you into a real groundhog. If you want muscles, go home and work for them." With that, he sent Pietro flying, one clean smack, and Pietro spun through the air before landing on his rear. Leon opened a portal, grabbed Pietro by the collar, and shoved him through. "Your apartment's on the other side," Leon said to the stunned Wanda. "You walking, or do you want to ride?" Wanda trembled. "I'll walk." She darted through the portal like a rabbit escaping a trap. Pietro's muffled complaints about school echoed from the other side as Leon waved. "You two did well today. Get to bed early. School in 2 hours and don't skip class." Leon closed the portal. The twins' distant wails about exams and lectures made Bruce laugh. "School," Bruce said with a wistful professor's smile. "I kind of miss it." "If you're nostalgic, you can go back," Leon replied. "I plan to have Wong build a formal magic academy, a more systematic training program. You'll have another chance." Bruce brightened at the idea. Wong always felt something was missing here. He even wanted to train like Hogwarts. "That'll make him happy," Leon said. He sent the agents who'd watched the spectacle, content and well-fed, back to New York, then joined Tony and the others. Mordo was still excitedly cataloging all the dimensional demon gods and how none had ever bested the Ancient One. "Time to go, Tony. You've got Avengers business today," Leon interrupted, clapping a hand on Tony's shoulder. "Mordo, Wong, guard the sanctum, set up video projections, and report to Jarvis in 2 days." With that, he stepped through a portal. Time moved quickly. A new day arrived. Leon woke in the embrace of a fair arm and padded into the dining room to find Shirley already setting out breakfast. "Good morning, Shirley," he said. "Brother Leon, you're up." Shirley swung her legs cheerfully from her chair. "Where are Sister Natasha and Yelena?" "They probably can't make it into the company today," Leon said as he sat. "And no, I didn't wake up. I finished my cultivation." Shirley tilted her head. "Okay, but if the sisters aren't working, what about the company?" "Jarvis will handle it as usual," Leon replied. After Jarvis became an intelligent life form, the advantage was that he became vastly smarter and could appear anywhere on the network, exerting tremendous computing power from any corner. The downside was that he developed emotions and a self-identity. He even chose a gender. That meant he needed his own private space. Tony had personally built a huge underground base in Stark Industries' industrial park for that purpose. Inside, he installed the latest planet-class computer he'd developed from the Starry Sky world's optical systems to serve as Jarvis's main body. The Stark mansion and Leon's apartment no longer housed Jarvis's subroutines. Now Jarvis only popped up on the local network when summoned. As soon as Leon finished speaking, a loading animation blinked on the projection device beside the dining table. A few seconds later, a door appeared in the projection, and Jarvis, impeccably dressed in a butler's uniform, pushed it open and glided in, bowing with theatrical ceremony. "At your service, young Master Leon," Jarvis intoned. "Wow!" Shirley squealed. "Every time Uncle Jarvis appears, I feel like I'm living in a fairy tale manor." "If you wish, Miss Shirley, young Master Leon would happily purchase you an estate," Jarvis replied, right hand over his chest. Shirley pouted. "Oh, that'd be too big. I wouldn't see Brother Leon enough." Leon laughed and ruffled her hair. "You little rascal, now you're comparing houses." "Are you not going to go help your little friends today?" Jarvis asked. "They're not being bullied anymore. Those guys are terrified of me, so I don't need to go," Shirley said, then held up her fork. "But Peter's aunt wants to visit to thank us." "Of course she can come," Leon said. Just check the time with your two older sisters before you give Peter a firm answer. A month had passed since the battle with Dormammu. Shirley had enrolled at Midtown High, and the story of how she met Peter Parker had become something of legend at home. On her first day, coming home from school, she had seen a group of older boys tormenting a younger boy in an alley. She jumped off the bus, chased them off, and learned the smaller boy's name was Peter Parker, new to the local elementary school and mocked because only his aunt had come to enroll him. Shirley had felt a surge of righteous purpose. She'd loved it so much she later beat up a group of delinquent students and set off a campus-wide brawl. The principal called Tony. When he arrived and met Shirley in his office, he'd been bewildered to find that his ward was the instigator. Shirley had simply said she wanted to be a hero and protect the weak. Tony had stared at her for a long moment, then left a check on the principal's desk with a note to fill in any amount and escorted Shirley out of the office. From that day on, she was notorious in Queens schools. Some kids even called her the Kingpin. The title got back across town to Hell's Kitchen, where the real Kingpin paid someone to look into her. That same night, men in black paid him a visit, broke his leg, and warned him, "If you investigate again, next time Superman will come for you." The Kingpin stopped sleeping for a month. Shirley, meanwhile, went to school every day, delighted to stop bullies wherever she found them. After breakfast, Leon used a cleaning spell to make the dishes shine. Shirley was used to his little talents. In her eyes, Leon was practically omnipotent. She bounced out the door. "I'm off to school. Make sure you take the bus and don't jump out a window this time." Leon watched her go, then looked toward his room. Through the wall, he could see the two Natashas sleeping, soft hair on pillows, sunlight catching each eyelash, and yet neither stirred. He smiled and shook his head. "They're terrible, but lovable." Since the Dimension War, the sisters had become energetic in ways that tried his patience, but two little black widows were hardly a match for him in the end. He checked his watch. It wasn't even 8 yet. "Wanda asked for time off today to talk about her dreams," he murmured. "So I've got a few hours." He settled on the sofa, closed his eyes, and cultivated. Inside his inner world, the world ring filled with the light of 100,000 suns, and his power rose with every passing second. Half an hour later, a soft doorbell pulled him out of his meditation. He opened the door to find Wanda standing there alone. She wore a red dress and white heels with light makeup that made her look like a blooming, dangerous rose. "You came early," Leon said. "Shirley already left." "If I'd come later, Pietro would have woken up," Wanda said as she followed him into the living room. "If Pietro wakes, he makes a scene and wants to tag along." She sat with her hands folded on her lap. Even though she'd been here many times, being alone with Leon still made her nervous. "Want something to drink?" Leon asked, opening the fridge. "Milk, warm if you have it," she replied. "No problem." Leon cast a small spell. The milk heated, poured into a cup, and floated to her. Wanda took a sip and relaxed a little. "Thank you." "Shall we start?" Leon asked. Wanda nodded slowly. "Last night I dreamed of that woman again." Since awakening to the chaos magic, Wanda had had nightmares almost every night. In them, she became other versions of herself. Some were mutants, some had slaughtered the monks of Camartage, others were planning revenge against Tony Stark at a Hydra base. The dreams left her unsettled, and on Pietro's advice, she'd come to see Leon, asking him to analyze and soothe whatever was causing them. Leon listened carefully, then began the assessment that had become routine over the last half-month, running through memories, tracing dream symbols, and casting calming wards to steady her mind. Half a month passed. Wanda had by now become familiar with everyone in the apartment building, but her first encounters hadn't exactly been smooth. The first time she came to Leon's place and saw little Shirley and the other women, Natasha and her sisters, disheveled in loose pajamas and messy hair, her still innocent heart was shaken. For a moment, she even wondered if Shirley might be a child Leon had fathered in his youth. Her dazed gaze swept over them, and she left stumbling through a stunned, apologetic farewell. She tried to smile but couldn't. She muttered that she was sorry to have disturbed them and walked away with an inexplicably heavy slump to her shoulders. A few days later, she was back at Leon's apartment. She simply couldn't help herself. The nightmares had come night after night and were almost driving her mad. They felt unbearably real, like she was living someone else's life. But those other lives were almost exclusively scenes of combat, with almost no everyday moments. In the dreams, her eyes were stained red, her vision from sky to earth a deep scarlet. Crimson power answered her every call, and a single gesture could end a life, like a demon god surfacing from a red abyss. Wanda, who had only ever killed livestock and dimensional beasts, could not accept these dreams where she was a mass killer. Every time she opened her eyes, she felt dislocated, as if she'd been ripped from one time into another. She needed to confide in someone, preferably someone like Leon who could use magic to soothe the mind. Otherwise, she felt she would lose her sanity. She told Pietro about the dreams. Pietro simply buried his face in his hands and said with a terrified look, "No, one sister is annoying enough. Please don't add any more." After shoving Pietro's head back into the sofa cushion, she had no choice but to go to Leon again. This went on for half a month. By now, Wanda knew Natasha and the others, and she'd learned that Shirley was a poor girl Leon had taken in. Knowing Shirley's background made Wanda feel a strange sympathy, and for the first time, the weight on her chest felt a little lighter, like a heavy stone had been moved. "That's how it was," Wanda said, pressing her slender fingers to her temples. Her face was drawn. In the dream, she destroyed all the Darkholds across the multiverse and died when Mount Wundagore collapsed. This dream was very long, and even now I still remember pieces. She paused, then added, "And I learned a lot of her magic again, only this time it seems mostly from the Darkhold." As she spoke, a scarlet light pooled at her fingertips, the color darkening under her control, like blood beginning to congeal. Her fingertips themselves started to blacken. "Stop it!" Leon's pupils narrowed. He immediately cast a counterspell and grabbed Wanda's hand. Arcane energy surged from him and expelled the dark power from her fingertips. Even the Wanda in your dream was mentally corrupted by using Darkhold magic. And you, a novice, are you trying to imitate her? He reprimanded her, firm. You have to pay attention to taboos when you use magic, especially spells that affect the mind or violate natural laws. Those are the ones you must be most careful with. He never imagined he would find himself lecturing someone about forbidden magic like Wong did. He looked over at Wanda, then his face suddenly went still. Wanda was looking at him with gentle eyes, her slender fingers still in his palm, like a docile lamb waiting to be petted. But Leon's attention had drifted to the faint crown hovering above her head, a translucent crimson circlet, ethereal and yet somehow present. Through it, you could almost see the wall behind her, as though it were a mere illusion. Leon knew what it meant. If it solidified, she would have fully become the Scarlet Witch, the power to reshape reality itself within her sight. In the main universe, the other Wanda had reached that level at a terrible cost, the death of everyone she loved. And this Wanda had only been dreaming for half a month, yet she was already approaching that threshold. Her rate of growth was faster than what Leon had seen even before he went to the Starry Sky world. "What's wrong?" Wanda blinked, touching the top of her head. "Is there something on my head?" Leon covered his face with his hand. "No, just a little jealous." "Jealous?" Wanda looked puzzled. "What I mean is, we need to go over this again." Leon relaxed his grip and placed his index finger lightly against Wanda's forehead, releasing a stream of mind-calming magic to help ease her stress. Then he began to explain slowly. "Dreams can be windows that let us glimpse alternate selves in parallel universes," he said. "We've discussed that the Wandas you see are your counterparts. Most of those other Wandas awakened their abilities because of the Mind Stone, while you awakened yours with the Space Stone. None of the other Wandas ever dreamed of their parallel selves like you do. Only you have this problem. And the dreams are almost entirely combat. Afterward, you pick up the magic or techniques you saw them use, right?" "Yes," Wanda said, nodding. She was sinking into the relaxation of his mind magic. Her eyes were half closed, her expression soft and comforted. Occasionally, her eyebrows furrowed, and she leaned back as if receiving a shoulder massage. "Then the source of your problem is probably the Space Stone," Leon continued. "All Wandas are born with chaos magic. The stones act like keys. They don't change the amount you have. They just activate or direct it. The intensity of chaos magic doesn't change. What changes is how the user learns to shape and apply it. Better technique and finer control equals more powerful results. The Wandas who were activated by the Mind Stone likely focus their chaos magic on the mind, so they're more adept at mental applications. The Space Stone, in your case, may be giving you the ability to communicate with and learn from Wandas in other worlds through dreams. That's probably an application of chaos magic in the spatial aspect. Wanda opened her eyes at that and said worriedly, "So does that mean I'll always have to dream about my counterparts? I don't care about their lives, and constant dreaming is making me weak." How could chaos magic be an inconvenience? Leon tapped her forehead lightly. Chaos magic belongs to you. The fact you keep dreaming means your control over it is weak, or rather, you haven't tried to control it. He finished the last of the spell, stood, and looked at her with a small practical smile. Your problem is clear for today. How to control and cast chaos magic. You can learn from your counterparts in your dreams. So go back and practice. The more you practice, the more you'll be able to direct your dreams. But don't practice using Darkhold magic. Leave that alone. Wanda lingered, reluctant to go. What if I still can't control chaos magic? Will I have to rely on your mind magic to ease my mind? She sounded like someone asking if she could book another session at a parlor. Can I still ask you next time? Leon's face darkened. No, don't be lazy. If you still have nightmares next week, I'll make you dream in layers, illusions inside illusions, so you'll have your homework. After Wanda left, Leon sank back onto the sofa and resumed cultivating. This had been his routine for the past month. Apart from occasionally assigning tasks to employees in various departments and paying the Natasha sisters each night, he was almost always immersed in his cultivation. The reason he'd taken the time to give Wanda psychological counseling, although there was a small, insignificant part of him that was attracted to her, was mainly pragmatic. Wanda's potential was enormous and her capabilities nearly limitless. Helping her now was helping his future self. To Leon, Wanda was the most unusual of the superheroes in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Her powers were unique, and so was her personality. If Tony was a mortal who could stand against gods, and Star-Lord was a god who could live among mortals, Wanda was a mortal with a mortal heart wielding divine power. From the start of her story, seeking revenge, to its end, losing everything and sacrificing herself, she had remained, at heart, an ordinary Sokovian girl who wanted nothing more than a peaceful life. Every surge in her strength came from tragedy. Her choices to protect others were driven more by the existence of her powers than by an iron will to be a hero. She didn't have a tightly held desire to fight. If she could trade chaos magic for a life in which her family was safe and ordinary, she would make that trade without hesitation. Someone like her would repay kindness 100-fold. Leon couldn't find a reason to refuse helping her. Wanda, I hope she really hons her chaos magic when she goes back, he murmured, then sighed and settled deeper into meditation. He had the nagging feeling Wanda would come back tomorrow, overwhelmed by nightmare and saying the spells were too hard to learn, that he'd have to soothe her again. Ding! The doorbell chimed. Before Leon could react, the apartment door slid open and Tony walked in. Tony had been granted free access to the place. Why are you here? Leon frowned. Why can't I be here? Tony lowered his signature sunglasses on his nose and peered at Leon over the rims with mock woundedness. Or, have we moved to the big city and now your old farm buddy is a bumpkin? Too much trouble to see? Leon pouted. I'm cultivating right now. Couldn't you have Jarvis tell me if something's up? Can't I come see you? Tony clutched an imaginary hand to his chest. What, is your anxiety flaring up again and you needed to confide in your old pal? After the dimensional war, not only had Wanda started having nightmares and needed counseling, Tony himself had developed a mild anxiety disorder for reasons no one could pinpoint. When he couldn't sit still at Avengers headquarters, he would come to Leon's apartment, calm down for a bit, then sprint back to Avengers Tower to work. The anxiety had eased after Tony helped little Shirley with a playground dispute and was touched by something she'd said, but it still flared. When anxious, Tony liked to tinker with odd projects. Jarvis had reported Tony was devouring the technical data from the Starry Sky World's optical computer, planning to build a starship. not to flee Earth, but to serve as a kind of arc weapon. If a dimensional demon god ever occupied the planet, Tony intended to make sure Earth and the invader went down together. If he couldn't save the planet, he would at least make the occupier suffer. The project was stalled by two things: incomplete theoretical understanding and a shortage of high-strength metals. Leon had pointed out Wakanda on a map as a clear source, and Tony had immediately sent Hawkeye to Africa to investigate. Hawkeye had been out of contact for 3 days. Leon suspected Tony was here to talk about Wakanda. "Hawkeye found anything?" Leon asked. "He has," Tony said, popping open the wine cabinet as if he lived there. Leon didn't drink. None of the others did regularly, so the bottles were Tony's contribution, all his favorites. But Wakanda won't let him go. They got something so important they'd sink Hawkeye in the Indian Ocean for it, Tony said, pouring brandy into a glass. They won't kill him, too politically hot, but they definitely won't let him leave. "Underestimate Hawkeye at your peril," he added, tasting the drink like a mouthwash and then recorking the bottle. He'd sworn off drinking and gambling, but this felt like a victory worth a sip. The second he reappeared alive, he transmitted the intel. "Guess what it is?" He looked at Leon expectantly. "There's a mountain of vibranium under Wakanda," Leon said casually. Tony's eyes went wide. "Shit, you knew and didn't tell me?" "Even if I'd told you, you still have to negotiate with Wakanda," Leon said. "Now that they've detained Hawkeye, it's actually an opening for a dialogue." "That's true, but you should have told me," Tony said, nodding. "Next time, I promise." "Okay, got it. I'll go." He started to move, then froze. "Wait, no, that's not why I came." Leon looked puzzled. "Then why are you here?" He loosened the suppression on his super hearing out of habit, and a few seconds later his eyebrows rose. The sound of Tony's voice shifted, as if listening to something else. "Oh, so you found Captain America under the ice at the North Pole, and Coulson's running the excavation?" Leon skied internally. Tony was always chasing every rumor. "I'm telling you, finding secrets so casually isn't endearing," Tony muttered, adjusting his shades. Leon raised both hands. "My mistake. Pretend I didn't say anything. Tell me about Captain America. Satisfy my curiosity." "You little punk, are you trying to annoy me?" Tony shook the bottle in his hand. "But that's not it either." "Then spill it," Leon said. "No guessing this time. Show off. Let me be entertained." "Remember those green-skinned aliens Fury led us to when we took down Hydra?" Tony's voice lowered, and his face grew serious. "They've turned up again, and they've infiltrated the Avengers." "Skrulls?" Leon sat up straight. "I had the Men in Black collecting evidence on them half a month ago. I was planning to use it to dismantle Overpowered. What, do you have concrete evidence now?" "No." Tony's expression darkened. "Jarvis discovered that someone in their ranks has been replaced. They even tried to hack into my systems to steal your data." Tony's tone hardened. "Wait, when did you start gathering evidence? Overpowered is a space agency. Why are you talking about dismantling it? And you didn't tell me you'd gone and done something big with the Men in Black." Ramat, Chapter 193, Nick Fury's Plan. "Didn't you set that up yourself before?" Leon asked. "You said the Avengers would handle Earth, and the Men in Black would handle anything extraterrestrial," Tony replied. "So it's fine for the Men in Black to act on their own, then?" Leon pressed. Tony set the wine bottle down on the table. "Are you sure it's fine? Man, you don't even like sharing good news with your big brother anymore. Maybe I should go back to the farm in Kansas and keep harvesting wheat." "You're joking again. Can't you be serious?" Leon's brow twitched. "You just said the Skrull were collecting information on me." "Yeah," Tony nodded, "but I haven't seen anything about it." Leon frowned. "So either they're planning something, or Fury's investigating me." Even when he tried to suppress it, Leon's super hearing still picked up anything about himself. He'd never heard anyone planning to steal his data from the Avengers, until now. "They're cautious around you. They don't even say your name, so you wouldn't hear it. Everyone in the world knows you can see through everything except lead, and your hearing covers the globe," Tony said. "In that case, anyone who wants to act against you would have to guard against those abilities, right? Maybe you're even a taboo among the Skrull, like Voldemort, he who must not be named," Tony said. He sat down beside Leon and put an arm around his shoulder. "Don't worry, I know how useless your hearing and vision are when people deliberately hide from them. Jarvis and I are already looking into it. We'll have answers soon." Leon shook his head. "Actually, my weakness to lead is gone." "Are you serious?" Tony's skepticism was obvious. 2 days ago, I shredded several military bases that had lead-lined compartments, places that were conducting secret operations against me, Leon said. "Those people, and whoever was behind them, are gone." "You should have noticed a few empty Senate seats 2 days ago." "That was them," Leon added. "I did leave alone those sites where lead was used to keep research confidential. People still need privacy. Nobody likes feeling exposed." "You're really generous," Tony muttered. "But when did you lose the lead thing? Are you secretly getting stronger again?" "It's the changes from the starry sky world," Leon explained. "I even brought you something back." Tony's face fell into understanding. He'd been studying the starry sky world's optical computer obsessively, an archive of advanced tech and weapon designs, not a full scientific system, but vast and alien in scope. Tony had assumed the world's tech explained everything. While Tony was thinking that, Leon closed the loop. It was Fury. "That guy always has to plan everything," he said, turning away from the window. "He built a lead room on the S-Shield space station. Everything about me is stored in it. My identity, my history, personality analysis, behavior predictions." "So he understands you better than I do now," Tony said, half joking. "He has a plan, the New Avengers Initiative," Leon continued. "He had the Skrull infiltrate your Avengers to collect more combat data, hoping to recruit me. That man's imagination is something else." Leon laid out everything Fury had locked away in that lead vault. Tony stared. "Lead has no effect on you anymore," he said. "Good thing you're not a detective. Every detective on Earth would be unemployed." Tony sprang to his feet. "Fury is a problem. No wonder his old agents are still talking to him. He's probably trying to form a new Avengers." "You said one thing wrong just now," Tony added, suddenly confident. "I know you better than Fury does." Tony waggled an index finger. "Some data's all it takes. I understand you so well that if you raised a finger, I'd know whether you planned to pick your nose or pick your teeth." "Oh, really?" Leon said, unamused. He extended a finger and jabbed Tony in the chest. In an instant, a massive force shoved Tony down into the sofa, smoothing the cushions around him until only his bewildered head stuck out. "Sorry," Leon said dryly. "It wasn't nose or teeth. I was thinking about poking you to death with one finger." Leon stood and waved the air. "Figure your way out of that yourself. I'm heading to the orbital base to set the girls' next moves." Their plan to flush the Skrull out had been meant to proceed slowly, but since Fury couldn't sit still, it made sense to force the issue in space sooner rather than later. Tony, buried in the sofa with only his neck craned, called after him, "Wait, why do you want to destroy Overpowered?" Leon paused at the doorway. Overpowered was set up by Maria, a former U.S. Air Force pilot, with Fury's help to handle interstellar disputes. It has human and Skrull members and uses a S.H.I.E.L.D. space station. It's technically subordinate to the Security Council, highly secret, but its powers are actually less than S.H.I.E.L.D.'s. Now Fury's holed up on that space station. He'll recruit unemployed ex-S.H.I.E.L.D. agents and expand SWRD's authority. You can read the file yourself. He called into the inner room. "How long are you two going to eavesdrop? Move it." The inner door opened, and the fully armed Natasha twins stepped out, both in black combat suits. After a nod to Tony, they fell in behind Leon and followed him out. They'd woken at the first visitors and quietly listened to the men's conversation from the inner room, waiting for Leon to call them. Once the apartment door thudded shut, Tony was left half swallowed by cushions. "SWRD, S.H.I.E.L.D. space station," he mumbled. "Fury, how many backup plans does that guy have?" 5 days later, on a New York morning, a video unexpectedly shot to the top of every major portal. A figure in pitch-black armor stood before a screen and didn't waste time. "Our world has suffered a secret invasion by an extraterrestrial force," the figure said. There was no melodrama, no long preamble. The voice beneath the armor, female, laid out the claim and then calmly presented evidence. Anyone who clicked recognized the suit at once, a man in black. Chapter 194, The Skrulls. Just a month ago, dozens of girls in black suits suddenly appeared across the world. They fought crime and rescued victims of disasters in city after city. They called themselves the Men in Black, and their name spread like wildfire. Most people remembered that these women first showed up during the Hydra War a few months earlier. One of Hydra's airborne carriers had been taken down by them, and later they helped encircle and crush Hydra. After that, however, they vanished. Rumors swirled. Some said they were survivors of Hydra's experiments, banded together as goddesses of vengeance who would return to ordinary lives after settling scores. Others claimed they were Tony Stark's all-female strike team, springing into action only when Iron Man needed backup. The most popular theory, much to the delight and envy of countless male netizens. Then came a televised hearing. During a live broadcast, Iron Man swore the Men in Black answered to Superman. The wild internet theories slowly died down. As time passed, the women who had disappeared faded from public memory, until, a month ago, they reappeared nationwide. This time, everyone knew the Men in Black were connected to Superman. His supporters hailed them as the Black Nuns, sent to redeem humanity. His critics warned the same women were the vanguard of a planned authoritarian takeover. The two camps bickered endlessly online. Open any comment section and you could find a fight. Even a Snow White clip would draw allegories. Someone would compare the queen who wanted to kill the princess to Superman and the princess to the common people. Supporters would counter that the prince was Superman and the queen was Hydra, long defeated. Shirley noticed it everywhere she turned. Fortunately, the noise began to die down when the superhero company released a movie titled Men in Black. The film told the origin and purpose of the Women in Black, a group of pitiful girls saved and redeemed by Superman, their creed carved into the narrative. Nothing is true, everything is permitted. Their duty, the movie claimed, was to manage extraterrestrial relations and stop hostile aliens from invading Earth. The story opened with the destruction of the Red Room training program by Superman and Iron Man, then followed the girls' tragic pasts, their rescue, their growth, and their role in taking down Hydra. The promotional window was short, but the film was a hit. In less than a week, it outgrossed another superhero company release, The Dark Knight Batman. While the company still produced local IPs and dabbled with DC properties, Superman had a rare global pull, and Men in Black put these women back in the public eye. Then a new video went up on the portal's homepage. A figure in black armor filled the frame. Almost everyone who watched recognized who the speaker represented. The Men in Black, speaking with the authority of Superman behind them. They presented evidence slowly at first, then with mounting force. The claims were extraordinary, but the footage they showed was damning. "We first became aware of alien activity because of this footage," the Men in Black said, and slid their palm across the screen. The feed switched to a leaked video from months earlier, the command room inside a Hydra airborne carrier. Most netizens had seen scenes from that battle. The camera showed the former director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury, and his team surrounded by Hydra agents. Gunfire broke out. In the chaos, someone on Fury's side fell, and where a body had been, a green-skinned non-human figure lay instead. The clip froze on that frame. "That green figure," the Men in Black intoned, "is an alien." "At the time, this strange body drew attention," the narrator continued. But then the former director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury, explained that the dead man was an enhanced human and the changes after death were side effects of the serum. He nearly fooled everyone. "He couldn't fool us. They said they had traced network traffic and found a secretly intercepted version of the same incident." The screen jumped back to the command room, this time with different angles. Fury and several others were bound in a corner. A Hydra agent walked by and was suddenly shot dead by someone who appeared to be the Hydra leader. When that agent hit the deck, he too transformed into a green-skinned creature. Then, one after another, 6 more Hydra members who showed signs of life fell and turned green. The leader calmly fired 6 more rounds at 6 onlookers who gasped, and each of them became green-skinned as they fell. Viewers were stunned. One enhanced human might be plausible. 7 Hydra members turning into the same thing? And this footage had been intercepted. Why would anyone hide it but to conceal a truth? This was a video Rising Tide planned to upload, the Men in Black said, but it was intercepted by a mysterious force. In fact, Leon had secretly told Agent K to preserve that clip for a moment like this, but that detail couldn't be made public. So the defunct Rising Tide organization took the official blame. The unusual nature of those 7 green-skinned people made us vigilant, the men in black continued. While we were dismantling Hydra, we were also tracking those green figures. After months of investigation, we found traces of them in multiple countries. Following those clues, we learned the truth. They inhaled, and the camera held on them for effect. The green-skinned beings are Skrulls, the men in black announced. They are interstellar refugees that the former director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury, unilaterally settled on Earth. If they were harmless, we could interpret his actions as charity, they said. But these Skrulls are not harmless. They are the thugs of the galaxy. They are invaders. Chapter 195, Global Shock. Skrulls are born with a unique ability, the Men in Black presenter said. They can mimic another's appearance, replicate their memories, even without physical contact. This isn't alarmism, he added, switching the screen. It's the terrifying truth we uncovered while tracking Fury. Surveillance footage filled the screen. Under a dim street lamp, a white man in a trench coat stood alone. The rest of the street was swallowed by darkness. From the shadowed edge, a hooded figure walked into the light. The two seemed to talk for a moment. The hooded figure suddenly drew a knife and stabbed the man in the neck, then steadied him. The hood came off, revealing green skin, and under the streetlight that face shifted until it matched the dead man's exactly. The footage cut off. The presenter returned. The man killed in that clip was Rowan, a mid-level intelligence officer at MI6. We can see from the footage his carotid artery was pierced. He was undoubtedly dead. But in reality, Mr. Rowan is still serving at MI6 and has even become one of their top agents. At that moment, the chat feed, commenting overlays, erupted with exclamation points and question marks. The presenter continued to play clip after clip. For 10 straight minutes, the screen ran surveillance from around the world, black and white in color, grainy and high def, a back alley in New York, a crowded street in Serbia. Every clip showed a Skrull replacing an Earthling. Some of the replaced were terrorists, others were officials in key government departments. The faces of those watching grew paler and tighter with every new scene. Even vendors and beggars, people far from politics, felt a cold prickle of dread. The world they thought they knew suddenly felt foreign. Anyone passing by seemed capable of being a Skrull. Jarvis and the Men in Black had recovered these raw videos by accessing closed local networks and sifting through corrupted data. Tony had seen them the day before and been rendered speechless. When the clips ended, a woman from the Men in Black stepped forward with a summary. Based on reliable evidence alone, hundreds of humans have already been replaced by Skrulls, she said. All of these replaced individuals had, at one point or another, interacted with Fury. Some were his enemies, some were people he needed intelligence from, and others were people he suspected. When we investigated Hydra, one question stood out. What allowed Fury to rise from a field agent to director in 7 or 8 years? I think we have the answer, she said. Fury used his alien friends to clear obstacles and earn promotions. In return, he provided shelter for them. They colluded. He even helped establish SW-ORD with these Skrulls, an organization directly answerable to the Security Council. We don't yet know everything SW-ORD has done, she continued, but in our investigation, the number of Skrulls currently on Earth is as high as 1 million. When the word million flashed on the screen, many viewers went blank with disbelief. Aliens that could change appearance and replicate memories, and there might be 1 million of them on Earth? And more were coming by spaceship? Some live in shelters, the presenter added. Some have replaced dying people and are already active. There's no doubt these extraterrestrial infiltrators are integrating into human society. They're learning, adapting, with the goal of one day replacing humanity. Faced with Skrulls, we Men in Black will not stand by, he declared. From this moment, we issue a formal warning to the Skrulls: leave Earth. Over the next 3 days, we will deploy identification equipment to countries across the globe. To everyone watching, especially government officials, be wary, be suspicious of those around you, be wary of the Skrulls. The video ended and the screen went black, but the comment feed kept racing. People raged and panicked. These scrolls deserve to die. A few months ago, Hydra attacked us. Now scrolls? I was wrong. Superman and the Men in Black are protecting Earth, not trying to be dictators. Send the ID equipment to Chicago now. My wife has been acting strange. She comes home late, showers immediately, doesn't want intimacy. She was replaced. I'm going to kill that scroll to avenge her. Great Trinity Superman, redeem these lost lambs. The 20-minute video spread across the internet in minutes. Skrull, human traitor Fury, Tide, and replacing humanity shot to the top of every trending list. Intelligence agencies around the world dissected the footage and reached the same conclusion. The evidence was reliable. Skrulls shown in the video were rounded up on site. Some escaped by using their shape-shifting ability, which only heightened officials' paranoia. 30 minutes after the video's release, the 5 permanent members of the Security Council spoke in unison and issued an urgent statement through press releases, live briefings, and videos with one unified message: expel the Skrulls and apprehend Fury. Chapter 196. Nick Fury and the Skrulls. Motherfucker! In the cold vacuum of space, inside the inverted cone of the Divine Blade space station, Nick Fury sat at his desk, watching a Men in Black video. A stream of curses slipped out before he could stop himself. He scoffed at the alarmist claims in the first half of the recording and immediately suspected a retaliation from the Starks. It wouldn't be the first time the Stark brothers struck back after discovering Fury had people digging into Leon's files. He fast-forwarded through parts of the tape while mentally sketching countermeasures. The video had already caused an uproar online, but Fury wasn't worried about internet noise. The web forgets. What mattered were the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. No matter how loud the public outcry, it would die down. Compared to that, his real concern was how Tony Stark had managed to detect Skrull infiltration in the first place. Skrulls who mimicked their hosts should inherit the original's memories and had access to SW Ward's advanced gear. They weren't supposed to be exposed. Fury's mind drifted until the Men in Black's narration yanked him back. As the presenter recited an uncanny amount of detail about Skrull biology and tactics, Fury's face darkened. Where had they gotten this intelligence? Had Superman and Iron Man encountered the Kree and learned something? But what followed made his stomach drop. Dozens of surveillance clips that should have been destroyed now laid bare the Skrull's abilities and the scale of the threat. Fury pictured the panic spread through government circles. He trusted Captain Marvel. She had shared hardship with the Skrulls, and he believed her. But the politicians on Earth didn't know that. Worse, many of the people revealed in the footage were targets from past missions, the very kind of evidence that had bolstered Fury's career. He couldn't explain himself now. Then the narrator dropped a number: 1 million. Fury's eyes widened. "Motherfucker," he muttered. 1 million Skrulls? Where did 1 million come from? Weren't there only a few thousand? He wanted to dismiss the claim, but a seed of dread took root. If true, everything changed. On the other side of the world, Chernobyl's ruined city lay abandoned under a pale sky. Where human feet no longer trod, green figures moved among cracked concrete and rusting cranes. Near the reactor, countless green heads bustled. Skrull refugees had made the radiation-scarred exclusion zone their home. The maintenance staff originally assigned there had long since been replaced. Unaffected by radiation, the Skrulls treated nuclear wastelands as shelters satellites often ignored. They called Chernobyl New Skrullos, a defiant name, a claim that this planet could become their new homeland. Inside a warehouse near the reactor, Skrull General Taros and his wife Sauron sat with several high-ranking elders around a long table. A projection unit replayed the Men in Black video on loop. The room was deadly quiet, taut with tension. "General, what do we do now?" someone finally asked. Taros rested his hands on the table and watched the looping footage without answering. The general who had led his people toward hope looked every bit as uncertain as the rest. After a long, measured breath, he spoke. "Let's wait for Fury. He and Captain Marvel promised to help us find a habitable world. They won't let us down." "But he can barely protect himself," another voice protested. "The United Nations has already issued a notice for his arrest." "He'll find a way," Taros replied, but his eyes shut briefly against the weight of his own uncertainty. "He's Fury. We have to trust him." And if he fails, someone else asked, should we confess to the humans and ask them to give us land? Taros said nothing. The question hung in the air, unanswered, and the room fell still. Taros's leadership leaned toward pacifism, a council of doves, but there were hawks among them. A thin young Skrull slammed his fist on the table and rose to his feet. Why don't we just declare war, he demanded. His eyes were hard with rage. Many of us are already embedded in the upper ranks of their governments. If we move, their leadership will crumble. We could even take control of their arsenals, the weapons divisions, the nukes. Chaos benefits us. Shut up, Gravik, Taros barked, slamming the table in reply. The sound made everyone jump. Do not even think of using force against Earth. Never. Gravik's jaw clenched. He did not relent. But I said, shut up, don't bring this up again. Taros snapped. When the young Skrull finally sank back into his seat, Taros rubbed his temples and let out a weary breath. Youth everywhere seemed the same. Impulsive, belligerent, blind to realities. They didn't know how formidable Captain Marvel was, or that there was a Superman on Earth now. How could the Skrulls possibly challenge beings like that? Meeting adjourned, Taros said, waving the others away. Go back and wait for news. It won't be long. One by one, the officials filed out until only Taros and Sauron remained. She touched his forehead gently. Don't worry, she said. Fury won't abandon us. Taros sighed. I hope so. His communicator buzzed then, Fury calling. Taros's chest lifted at the sight of the incoming connection. Once linked, Fury's virtual projection flickered to life above the projector. Fury didn't waste time. Taros, tell me honestly, what have you been hiding about the destruction of the Skrull planet? Taros's hopeful expression froze. He wanted to deny anything, to reassure Fury, but his eyes involuntarily flicked away. He forced a small, stiff smile and said, I promise, you know everything you need to know. Is that so? Fury's tone hardened. So the men in black are lying, or is there something I shouldn't know? Taros took a deep breath. The situation is this. We were defeated by the Kree and fled. Millions of Skrull refugees were left homeless. Oh, Nick Fury's eyes darkened. So they all came to Earth, or are they still wandering somewhere else? Nick's gaze cut into Taros like a blade. Taros fell silent, then licked his lips, a helpless expression on his weathered green face. After several tries, he nodded. Yes, they're here. Who? Fury's voice hardened. Who's here? Taros looked even more helpless. Everyone. Fury snorted. So there really are 1 million Skrulls on Earth? Taros swallowed and nodded. Yes. God damn it! Fury slammed his fist on the table. You lied to me. Taros reached for an explanation. Nick, I only sent a beacon to the universe. I told the Skrulls who were still fleeing that there were people willing to take us in, places where we could seek temporary refuge. There are countless hunters after us across the galaxy. We had 2 choices, be killed or come here. I'm a Skrull general. I had no choice. He sounded desperate and earnest. Fury's face only twisted with anger. No choice, he spat. All for your people. So reasonable. But what the hell does that have to do with me? Taros, stung, shot back. What? You treated us like spies, like tools, sacrificed our people for your objectives. Now you act like it's none of your problem? The 2 men bellowed at each other until Fury found his voice again. You deceived me. You hid this. You brought millions of Skrulls to Earth. Taros, tell me what you really intend to do. Taros gasped for air. I only ask you to help the Skrulls integrate into Earth, Nick. Fury laughed, a cold, bitter sound. Impossible. You've lived on this planet for 10 years. Don't you know humans can't even live together among themselves? Where would 1 million Skrulls go? Taros's features sagged. He looked suddenly old, as if the weight of the news had turned his hair white overnight. He tried to plead. Isn't there some other way? No, Fury cut him off. I'm going to call Carol back. Tell her whatever ideas you have. But for now, if you don't want to be captured, leave Earth. He ended the transmission without another word. In the empty warehouse, Taros, supported by his wife, slumped into a chair. How could this be? He murmured. On the S-board space station, Fury fell back into his armchair with a heavy thud. The motion left him drained and oddly defeated. He stared at his desk, but his gaze seemed to go past it, out into the dark of space. After a long silence, he sighed, opened a drawer, took out a pager, set it on the table, and pressed send. I didn't think I'd call Carol again, he said to no one, and not because Earth is in immediate danger, but because of the scrolls. He spun the chair to look through the capsule's window at the boundless universe beyond. For the first time in a long while, Fury's usual sternness was edged with dejection. 1,000,000 scrolls on Earth was a powder keg. If they stayed, war was inevitable. If they left, SW Ord stood to be dismantled. In short order, he could lose everything he'd built over the past decade. He blamed the Stark brothers for setting much of this in motion, but Fury couldn't bring himself to hate them. Whether Hydra or the Skrulls, both were lurking threats beneath a fragile peace. If Leon and Tony hadn't uncovered those threats early, who knew how bad it would have been when they finally exploded? Fury felt a grudging gratitude toward them, and an even stronger, growing vigilance. It might not be enough to save what was already slipping away. Meanwhile, in New York at the Avengers base, Leon and Tony stood side by side in front of a one-way observation window. Neither knew that half the enemies had already surrendered. Tony had no way of knowing, and Leon didn't particularly care. For the most part, Leon had let the Men in Black develop and run the operation to expel the Skrulls on their own. Aside from helping Tony build a Skrull identification device, he had no intention of participating unless a Super Skrull appeared. For incidents at this level, he didn't see a reason to waste his own time. They were watching Captain Steve Rogers through the glass. He lay on a white lab bed, the old man in the ice joke unavoidable. "You called me here just to watch this?" Leon asked. "To watch a century-old popsicle thaw?" Tony grinned. "Ice pop? That's good. Why didn't I think of that? I didn't just bring you here to watch. I brought you to make sure everything is foolproof." "And to act as security," Leon clarified. "Security?" Leon smirked. He understood the first part, but not this. "Are you getting paranoid? What are the odds someone attacks an international organization like ours?" "Don't you know?" Tony snapped. "Ever since you briefly unleashed that terrifying energy when you took the Space Stone over a month ago, the Avengers' headquarters has been a target for the mystical crowd. They're trying to investigate. We've intercepted several of those witches," Tony continued, "but they slipped away. The devices and agents S.H.I.E.L.D. left behind can't hold them." Leon's interest piqued. "Oh? Where are these witches? Take me to them." "You can see them." Tony spread his hands. "But they get away. Those containment tools aren't enough." "That's a pity." Leon didn't sound particularly upset. "I once leaked some of the stone's energy at Kamartaj to divert attention." He shrugged. "But no one went looking there. If those mystics won't even set foot in their own sanctums to investigate, they're not as bold as they pretend." Leon clapped Tony on the shoulder. "You need to bulk up your Avengers. You can't even hold off the weaker mystical groups." Tony pointed to Steve on the bed. "Which is why what we're doing, bringing in new personnel, matters." "You mean Captain America?" Leon raised an eyebrow. "You actually want to pull him into the Avengers?" Chapter 198, Steve Rogers wakes up. "Why not?" Tony says, seeing no problem with it. He presses his right hand to the glass. In the texts and videos the old man left behind, he talks most about his inventions and then about Steve Rogers. We're even ranked behind this 70-year-old popsicle. Tony looks at Captain America on the other side. "From those lines I saw nothing but praise, effusive praise, describing him like he's not even a real person." "I want to see how unpersonlike he really is," Leon says, nodding. "So you're jealous then? Because you're jealous, you want to bring Captain America onto the Avengers and then beat him with your accomplishments?" Tony had only heard praise from his strict father in Howard Stark's recordings. But that same Howard had lavished high praise on Captain America. Tony is, predictably, indignant. He's already scheming how to prove himself better than the Star-Spangled Man. Their first meeting was bound to have tension. "Jealous? You think I'd be jealous of him? Good heavens, jealous of someone who's been frozen for 70 years? Tony snaps, clearly irritated. He wants to change Leon's opinion. "Do you see Coulson over there?" Tony points at Coulson standing by the bed. "He's a fan of Captain America. If it weren't for his enthusiastic push to bring Rogers back, I would absolutely keep Mr. Popsicle in the ice. Rather than drag him into a modern world he doesn't know. I'm so humanitarian, you're really going to say I'm jealous of him?" Leon studies Coulson. The bald middle-aged agent is staring at Rogers with an almost lit-from-within look. Now that Leon thinks about it, Coulson had looked at him the same way before. Perhaps, Leon says noncommittally. He speaks into the air. Jarvis, what do you think? Jarvis answers through the amplifier near Leon. Young Master Leon, I can confirm Agent Coulson admires Captain America, but the rescue plan was actually pushed by Mr. Stark. Leon spreads his hands toward Tony. See? I'm not saying I don't believe you, but you're twisting the facts. Tony shuts his mouth. Jarvis having an opinion is discomfiting. All right, just a little curious, he admits. But definitely not jealous. Young Master, I also don't think Mr. Stark is jealous. He's never been an envious person, Jarvis adds. See? Jarvis understands me better. Tony grins. Leon shakes his head, smiling. Jarvis can even flatter Tony now. Whatever you say. He looks back at Coulson. But why is Coulson still here? He's Nick Fury's trusted agent, isn't he? Now that Avengers agents are getting involved with the Skrull situation, aren't you supposed to send him on ahead? Soon, Tony says. Once Rogers wakes up, Coulson will head to Africa to negotiate with Wakanda. Right now, he just wants to say a few words to his idol before he leaves. Tony adds, besides, while Fury's confidants trust him, they don't necessarily trust the Skrulls. When S.H.I.E.L.D. was reorganized into the Avengers, Hawkeye and Hill reported those green-skinned aliens to me, he continues. Any normal Earthling would be wary of beings who can change their faces. Is that so? Leon nods. Seems they haven't been assimilated by the Black Egg. No one knows what Fury is thinking. Tony glances at the clock. 7 more minutes. Are you sure Mr. Popsicle is perfectly fine? Leon frowns slightly. According to Jarvis's estimate, he should wake within half an hour. But Rogers still looks like he's sleeping soundly. Don't worry, he's healthy, Leon answers. All his cells are intact, it's a miracle, and his neural activity is gradually increasing. Jarvis is right, he'll wake soon. Leon's tone shifts. Why do I suddenly feel like a bunch of dwarfs waiting nervously for Snow White to wake? Tony smirks. So he won't wake because he's waiting for his prince to kiss him? Why don't you go kiss him awake, Prince Tony? Leon teases. Sorry, Pepper said I can only kiss her now, Tony snips, tapping the glass. Any kid who's read Captain America's storybook knows Rogers owes Peggy Carter a dance. Maybe we should invite Aunt Carter. Agent Carter. Carter, huh? Leon's voice trails off. On the other side of the glass, Steve Rogers opens his eyes. His icy blue eyes are clouded with a thin mist, confusion written across them. The first thing he sees is an unfamiliar ceiling. The air smells of disinfectant. His neural network, frozen for half a century, begins to stir. Memory scenes overlap and flood in. His memory stops at the crash. He can still picture the approaching glaciers, but in a blink the glaciers are gone, replaced by a ceiling that smells of antiseptic. Where is this? Instantly alert, Captain America draws on his core strength and sits up halfway. He grips the thin white blanket like a weapon and a shield against vision. Who are you? Where is this? He demands of the guards. As his gaze sweeps the room, he also catalogs its layout in a flash, part of the super soldier enhancement. He knows languages, combat techniques, edged weapons, and he has an instinctive spatial memory. Beneath him is a medical bed. Beside it sits large, precise equipment, medical devices. The room otherwise has 4 walls and a single door. One wall holds a huge mirror. The other 3 are plastered with large posters. Each poster is labeled with a decade, from the 1950s to the early 21st century. 6 posters in all. Under each year are photos, home appliances, communications devices, transport, cityscapes. Hundreds of images record the world's changes in chronological order. Steve's wary gaze softens into bewilderment. The photos on the wall are so concrete they feel real, but they make everything feel unreal. The people around him, some in lab coats, some in suits, show no hostility. They look at him with curiosity, surprise, even admiration. A stranger anxiety wells up in him. Where is this? He asks again, though his grip on the blanket loosens. Captain, you're finally awake. The bald Agent Coulson moves forward, hands on his hips, awkward, relieved. It's 2008. You were frozen for nearly 70 years. You're finally awake. Welcome to the modern era, Captain. Steve stares at Coulson. 70 years? He turns his head slowly and lets his eyes rest on the timeline posters. Every time his gaze moves to the next poster, the world changes. The things on the previous poster vanish, replaced by the new. The long sweep of time is compressed into these images, making him feel suddenly small and out of place. The photos are at once familiar and alien. No matter how new the machines or how different the streets, he catches vague echoes, shapes and silhouettes of people and objects that belong to him and to a time that has moved on without him. Those shapes don't belong to him anymore. They've long been carried away by time, leaving him outside of it. Was he really frozen for 70 years? The world seems to tilt. There is one thought that overwhelms him. Had that person, had she, also disappeared into one of those posters from the 80s or 90s? Had he missed that promised dance with Peggy Carter? On the other side of the one-way mirror, Leon pointed at Captain America, who was being debriefed by Coulson. "I told you," he said, "instead of following those psychologists' staged-era reenactments, it's better to just lay the truth out in front of him." "See? He's taking it pretty quickly, isn't he?" Tony replied. "He is, but he's also on the verge of breaking down." Tony watched the tremor in Steve Rogers' pupils and felt something cold tighten in his chest. He'd seen that look before, back when he was trapped in the cave in Afghanistan. Both men carried the grief of an impending eternal separation from the people they loved. The captain everyone called too perfect to be human, as Howard had put it, suddenly had a very human expression. "He's probably thinking of Carter," Leon said. "Like you said, anyone can see it's a lifetime of regret. But now Peggy's married, and she has dementia. There's no chance." Tony thought of the movie arc everyone knew, the Steve Rogers from another world who traveled to return the Space Stone in the 1970s, who then stayed and lived out his life with Peggy, only to reappear after the blip to pass the shield on. Hearing Leon, Tony felt a wistfulness. Yeah, if Peggy found another life in her 40s, Rogers will be crushed. "Tony, do you know who Peggy's husband is?" Leon raised an eyebrow. "Why do you ask?" Tony paused. He had no impression. Peggy's marriage had been kept secret, the man supposedly classified. "No, I don't remember anything about him." "Is that so?" Leon fell quiet. He lifted the suppression on his super hearing for a moment, and seconds later, the information he wanted filtered in. "Just as I thought," he muttered. Looking at the exhausted man on the other side of the glass, a slightly mischievous and undeniably gleeful idea occurred to Leon about Captain America. He hesitated, then asked Tony, "Are you sure you want to recruit Rogers into the Avengers?" "Of course," Tony said without turning. "The Avengers need a living symbol." "Superman would be better for that role," Leon said, "if only you plan to recruit him." "I'm already on the roster," Leon replied. "I'll act if the Earth is in danger." "It's precisely because you only show up in the end and don't do day-to-day operations that I want Rogers," Tony countered. Leon spread his hands. "It's your decision then, but what are you going to do about Bucky? Hide it from Rogers? He's his best friend." At the name Bucky, something like a shadow crossed Tony's face. He pursed his lips. "Hiding it isn't a solution. I'll be honest with Rogers." "How?" "At the right time, tell him the whole story," Tony said, exhaling. "Not bluntly. There's a way to do it." "Tell him face to face?" Leon shook his head. "That's very you. Fine. It's your Avengers. You make the calls." "I killed Bucky," Tony said flatly, "and I never regretted it." "Then if Rogers wants revenge later, let him come after me," Leon replied. He walked to the door, fished a jade bottle out of his coat pocket, and handed it to Tony. "I'm heading out. Here, this is for you. You decide how to use it." Tony took the bottle and watched Leon's retreating figure. A cool sensation ran from his palm into his hand, making his chest tighten. He glanced back at Steve behind the glass and thought of Leon's earlier question about Peggy. He felt, suddenly, that he understood why Leon had given him the bottle. This kid. Compensate and tease at the same time, Tony muttered with a short laugh. The weight of Bucky's shadow in his heart eased a little. He convinced himself Leon had handed over the Zeus spring water partly as compensation for Steve and partly as mischief, or maybe as support for an old comrade. Happy with his interpretation, Tony tucked the jade bottle away and pushed through the door into the debriefing room. He swung open the door with a grin. "Soldier Steve Rogers," he said, "as far as I know, you have an appointment, don't you?" Nick Fury's warning to Talos hadn't changed things much. Even the Dove faction among the Skrulls, the one Talos represented, had largely agreed to temporarily evacuate Earth. But dissent existed within any people. A day later, only the Skrull refugees in official shelters had left, Most Skrulls who lived openly on Earth stayed. They'd already adapted to life here. Some had risen to high positions, others worked manual jobs, but it was stable work, better than a life on the run. How could they abandon everything and return to the precarious existence of fugitives? They trusted their disguises were flawless. The Skrull disguise was thorough, so thorough they believed that even genetic tests couldn't reveal them. After all, they'd fled across the galaxy for generations and only ever run into countermeasures from the three great empires. A small, remote planet like Earth seemed an even less likely threat. The so-called Men in Black were, to them, nothing but clowns. The Skrulls who remained on Earth felt confident and unafraid. Their confidence collapsed the moment the Men in Black started deploying identification devices. The devices were mobile towers, entirely black, 3 meters tall, conical. When activated, they emitted a special radiation within about 10 kilometers. That radiation interfered with the Skrulls' disguises, making their appearances flicker between their original green, ridged forms and the human faces they wore. When governments around the world switched the towers on, the results were immediate and devastating. People in Washington found the staff cleaning President Ellis's quarters were Skrulls. In Buckingham Palace, one of the Queen's closest attendants shifted into green. The governor's office in New Delhi revealed a Skrull at its desk. In the streets, people felt the wind and the sun and turned, and there were green figures everywhere. Skrull, Skrull, Skrull. The Skrulls themselves didn't even realize their features were switching. Many were stunned when they were knocked down or shot, confusion still on their faces, because outwardly they had never expected to be seen. That day, tens of thousands of Skrulls were unmasked in broad daylight. The whole world suddenly knew the Men in Black had not been exaggerating. Governments moved into martial law. The Men in Black were dispatched to hunt and detain Skrulls. The Avengers, with a newly awakened Captain America leading them, were deployed to take back control. For the first time since they'd been hiding in plain sight, the Skrulls understood fear. Power and titles meant nothing once their identities were exposed. That night, thousands of Skrull ships rose into the sky from landing sites around the world. As a race that had been on the run for eons, evacuations on a large scale were second nature to them. Within a day, nearly all of the millions of Skrulls who had been living on Earth had boarded ships and fled, overnight leaving behind a planet that had finally learned their true faces. One day later, in the universe, a brilliant star cast light across the galaxy, sunlight threading through the deep void and carrying warmth to distant reaches. At the edge of that light, the dim cosmic expanse split into hexagonal facets as if cut by an invisible blade. This was the Marvel Universe's method of faster-than-light travel, a jump point. As one hexagon closed, another opened, connecting a star system tens of thousands of light-years away to the solar system. A starship streamed through the portal, skimmed past Neptune and Uranus, and finally slowed near Mars's orbit. Countless ships hovered there, a swarm settling around a single prize. When the distant vessel came to a halt, a shaft of brilliant light shot from it like a high-speed torch across the stars. It dove into the fleet, paused at the rear of the largest ship, descended, and slipped through an open hatch. The hatch sealed, and the torrent of photon energy surrounding Captain Marvel winked out. She deactivated her suit's vacuum mode. The cowl that had raked her hair into a mohawk loosened. Shoulder-length gold hair fell naturally, softening her angular, square face. Standing there to greet her were Taros, his wife, and his daughter. Taros's skin, like patterned bark, creased into a welcoming smile. "Long time no see, Carol," he said warmly. "Taros, what are you doing here?" Carol rested her right hand on her hip. The form-fitting suit emphasized the power in her stance. She smiled at the old friend she hadn't seen in years. "If you hadn't messaged me, I might have thought this whole armada was here to invade Earth." "How could that be? Skrulls are friends to humans. Why would we attack?" Taros returned the smile, but it was strained. "Of course I know that." Carol spread her arms, amused. "Why do you all look so stiff? Sauron, Gaia, come here, let me give you a hug." She embraced Taros's wife and daughter. Only after did she turn back to Taros and grow serious. "So you came to support Earth? All these ships, even civilian transports. Who's invading Earth?" Taros's bark-like face trembled. Shame flushed over him. It's no one is invading, Carol. The situation is, he tried to frame it gently, glossing over the fact that many Skrulls had fled in haste only when the hunters were closing in. Even so, Carol's smile drained away. "A million Skrulls?" she said, disbelief echoing Nick Fury's reaction. "How could you do this, Taros?" "I'm sorry," he said with a bitter smile. "I couldn't stand by and watch my people hunted across the galaxy." "You can't," Carol started, then stopped when she saw Gaia, only a teenager beside Taros. She set her hands on her hips, lowered her head, and shook it with a sigh that held disappointment. Taros bowed his head. He knew he had let Carol down. "So?" she asked. "Did you have Fury call me? How do you want me to help?" Taros knew Carol was their last hope and appealed to their shared history. "I'm sorry, Carol. I know I failed you and Fury. But my people are innocent. They're good people. They don't deserve to die out here," he pleaded. 10 years ago, I met you when you were still controlled by the Kree. Fighting alongside you, getting your promise that you would help us find a new home, that was my fortune. I know how powerful you are. I believe your kindness will give us hope again. That's why I brought them to Earth temporarily. I thought a new world would be found soon. I convinced them it would be brief. I was wrong. It's my fault for being unrealistic." Carol listened. For more than a decade, she had been a lone traveler across the Milky Way, her ship and the stars her only companions. Memories of promises and of Earth had become like faded photographs, precious for their very fragility. Taros's words tugged at something she had tried not to feel. She swallowed and stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Don't blame yourself, Taros. I'm sorry too." Her voice softened. "There aren't many planets fit for life. I was too optimistic when I promised." Taros's face shifted. Hope flickered. "This isn't your fault," he said, but the worry returned. "We'll be homeless again, back to uncertainty and flight. But life has to go on. I just hope we don't run into the Kree fleet too soon. Their cannons can shred ships. They hate us. If they find us, they'll attack. Who knows how many would survive? It's the children I fear for." Carol's lashes trembled as she pictured the carnage. Guilt pressed at her chest until she found a steadier tone. "There's still a way." Taros's voice was thin with hope. "What way? We have nowhere left to go." "Earth fears your power," Carol said bluntly, "so I'll show them my power and vouch for you. I'll convince them you can stay." She tightened her jaw. "And I'll gather some friends and search harder for a new home. Fast." Taros's shoulders eased, but Carol's practical mind kept the plan grounded. A million Skrulls together is dangerous. When numbers swell, problems arise. Some will develop dangerous ideas. You'll need to arrange for a portion of them to move to other habitats. If we reduce the base population, they'll be easier to manage, and we'll have time to keep searching for a planet that fits. She believed this was the most workable plan for now. Temporary refuge on Earth under her guarantee, combined with gradual resettlement to other locations as they became available. Taros nodded, relief and apprehension mingling on his face. Carol looked out at the fleet, the enormous responsibility settling on her shoulders. The stars were vast, but she would not let an entire people be lost to it.